Yeah, I like hot. Okay, we have bits coming in. Don't see anything yet. Don't see anything yet. I don't like that it says fatal on here.
Oh.
But maybe. Go back to stream targets. Those are on. Says we're live. Oh, there we are. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Ranger Alyssa. You may recognize me from our fall videos that we just wrapped up a couple of weeks ago. And as a stand-in, because I don't have Ranger, Claire, or Maddie here today, but we do have a special guest, Kyle, who works at the Visitor Center at Big Meadows, which is where we are right now. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It was my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. We have a few exciting questions to ask Kyle because he's a weather enthusiast. And he gave us a hint that there's some snow on the way. So we really want to talk to him about that and let you all know what's happening as well in the park in the next couple of weeks, or for the month of December anyway. He's got a few visual aids that we'll share, and we'll get into that kind of near the end of the broadcast. But we are planning to do these broadcasts every month this year. Well, then 2022 and then 2023 we'll be back, of course. And we want to hear what topics you guys want us to talk about. So if you want to, you can drop those in the comments during this broadcast. Just tell us some of your suggestions, and we'd love to hear them. You can also add some of your questions that you might have for myself or Kyle, and we'll answer those at the end as well. So we have a couple of different things we're going to do. In the fall broadcast, we would do a peak check, but we decided for these broadcasts, we're going to do what's called a naturalist moment. So we did, and we reached out to our park botanists and some of the biologists and people that work and are considered experts on these topics, and we asked them what is happening in the park right now with the flora and fauna, so the animals and the plants. So I'm going to read the email they sent me because I cannot do it justice. I have to do this. So we have wood frogs and gray tree frogs both pack their cells full of chemicals to keep them from freezing in the winter. That's crazy. And then all the areas between the cells freeze solid, and that makes their heart stop beating. And apparently some insects do that too, such as the woolly bears. So those are the really fuzzy caterpillars you might see cross the road.
Which, by the way, are rumored to predict the winter weather. However, I would not rely on them.
We also have some intel on rattlesnakes. They're going to spend the winter in communal hibernacula, so that's a snake, another word for a snake pit. I'm going to stay away from those. If you're asking who might be in the woods this time of the year, don't forget to keep your eyes out for the northern saw-whet owls, eastern screech owls, and barred owls. Saw-whet owls will migrate through the park in November and December, and some may stick around for the winter and then head back to Canada to the breeding grounds in the spring. So, and screech and barred owls will be around all year. All right, and then of course our bear. We have some clues about our bear. After weeks of consuming all kinds of natural foods, like acorns for an example, and packing on weight in preparation for winter, many park black bears will be entering their dens at this time. So when they were packing on all that weight, that's called hyperphagia, and they were consuming upwards of 20,000 calories per day.
Without the help of a fast food restaurant.
That's crazy. All right, and then lastly, did you all know that we have mistletoe in the park? I didn't know that myself, so that's really cool. Although it's not legal to gather, please bring your sweetie to the park, and you can go find some mistletoe high up in the branches of trees, and you can have your sweet little mistletoe kiss there. But please don't climb up the trees, that it's not safe. But yeah, that's in the park, which is so cool. I had no idea.
Yeah, it's very, very cool to see.
Yeah. All right. So that was our naturalist moment. So now we're going to go over a little bit of housekeeping or some updates in the park. So first and foremost, we have some facilities have closed, but not all. We have Big Meadows. The Visitor Center at Big Meadows is still open.
Yeah, so the Big Meadows Visitor Center is going to be closed on Tuesdays and Wednesdays through the winter season. However, we are here to help you out with any hiking suggestions, any trail updates, anything like that, trip planning. we're here from Thursday to Monday from 9 a.m. to about 4:30 in the afternoon. So make sure you stop by. Our cooperating bookstore is also going to be open during those hours. So you can pick up a souvenir here at the Big Meadows Visitor Center.
Awesome. We also have some picnic areas that are open year-round. You can find those on our website. And you brought up a great point about the frost-free faucets that we said you were going to say because I knew I'd mess that up.
So the frost-free spigots are definitely going to be a big thing to remember up here. So the temperatures up here during the winter time are going to be absolutely frigid at times, possibly well below zero. So that means that obviously there are going to be some problems with freezing pipes. So remember to look at the Plan Your Visit tab on Shenandoah's website. Once you go to the Plan Your Visit, look for the drinking water availability. Now there will be kind of the availability of that drinking water all through the park, but just remember that not all of it will be potable. So there are going to be a couple that say boil before using. However, if it does not say boil before using, all of that water will be potable. So here at the Visitor Center, for example, we do have water availability inside of the restrooms in the sinks. However, all of the drinking fountains around the Visitor Center have been turned off for the season.
Great. Thank you for that. Yeah. We also want you all to know that with some of the snow that might be coming this month and then throughout the winter, that sometimes throughout the park they will close sections of Skyline Drive, and that is the main road that goes through Shenandoah National Park. However, even with Skyline Drive closed, Shenandoah National Park remains open and you can access it on foot. So if you want to come into the park and hike even when there's snow and the drive is closed, you can park at some of the entrance stations and hike in. Other ways to check for the Skyline Drive status, you can go on our social media pages, so Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. You can call our park phone line, so that's 540-999-3500, option 1, or you can do our newest alert system, and you can text Shin Alerts, all caps, all one word, to 888-777 and subscribe to those alerts. So make sure that if you want to know what the status of Skyline Drive is, to try one of those options or all three of those options, you will find your answer. We also have a couple more updates before we talk to Kyle about the snow. But we do want to say that phase 1 of the Old Rag pilot project ended yesterday, November 30th, and you will no longer need a day-use ticket to hike Old Rag. We have been collecting data since March. Now we're going to enter phase 2, where we are going to study all of it, and then hopefully by early 2023, we're going to share that data with the public. So look forward to that too. Lastly, we have implemented a new policy on campground reservations, most notably in Big Meadows Campground, which will become all reservable sites. We have a bit of a new system, how that's going to work, and you can absolutely go onto our website, and we have a web page dedicated to how that system's going to work, and we'll explain that a little bit more in January once we get further into the season. So definitely go to our website and look in campgrounds for that information. All right. Whew, deep breath.
Mention comments, questions.
Oh, yes. If you have any comments or questions, please put those in the comments right now. You can do that on YouTube or Facebook, and we will happily answer them afterward. So I don't know why I'm looking through my notes. I've got you now.
And I'm happy to be here. Like I mentioned, talking about one of my very favorite subjects in the world, and that's going to be weather, and especially the chances of snow. Of course, winter time, unlike myself, Allie's favorite time of the year is going to be summer.
Yes.
She likes the heat and humidity. However, myself, I like that cold and snow. And so does Neil, our cameraman here. So yes, everybody has their own love of weather. So yes, there are some amazing things to talk about. Of course, winter is going to be a time in the park that you have to be very careful for slips and falls. Mm-hmm. There have already been some incidents with ice on trails, so that is very important to remember, that just because it might be warm down in, let's say, Washington, D.C., it's going to be much, much colder up here, and I can talk a little bit more about that in just a few moments.
Yeah. So actually, one of the most popular questions we get in the fall and in the winter is, what is the temperature difference between the valley floor and the mountain?
Yeah, so of course, there's all kinds of different physical science and things at work here. So think about Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. is at 72 feet above sea level. So that's pretty low. Then you look at Richmond. Richmond is going to be about 200 feet above sea level. And then you look at, let's go into the valley. Luray is going to be around 800 feet above sea level. So all pretty low. But then you get up here to Big Meadows, and we are a convenient 35, so 3,535 feet. So that's about 3,464 feet above, above Washington, D.C., let's say if you're coming from Washington.
Yeah.
So, and I'm sure you've noticed that the temperature's a lot cooler up here when you come. Mm-hmm. And this is going to be something called the adiabatic or adiabatic lapse rate.
Spell that.
You know what? You put me on the spot. I have to write things down sometimes. So, of course, if you are talking about, let's say, the warming from the sun. So when you have the sun enter our atmosphere, it's going to hit the ground. You can get some radiational heating, or so you're going to heat the ground before you start to heat the atmosphere typically. There will be a very little bit of gases that are going to be excited by some of the maybe UV lights and other kind of energy coming into the atmosphere. So that might warm the air a little bit, but for the most part, it's going to warm from the ground up. So when you are at ground level, you're going to, well, we're at ground level here, but when you're in the valley or at the coastal plain, somewhere that you have a lot more land around you, you're not poked up into the atmosphere. You are going to have a lot more land around you to kind of take in some of that sun's energy, and then it re-radiates it into the atmosphere. So the further you get away from that ground, the less land you have available to warm. So in other words, you're going to be losing about 2.8 to 5.8 degrees Fahrenheit for every 1,000 feet you go up in the atmosphere. And part of that is because of the lessening of gases as you go up in the atmosphere. So you have an expansion of air, fewer molecules, fewer gas molecules to be able to kind of excite and keep warm. So, Allie, if you are coming from Washington, D.C., where it is 72 feet, up to Big Meadows, where it's 3,535 feet, how much cooler would it be up here at Big Meadows?
Talk about being put on the spot. Quick math. Like 10 degrees.
Hey, that's pretty good. So you would generally have to plan for dressing for temperatures that are about 10 to 20 degrees colder than Washington, D.C. And I can tell you from checking out some of our guests here in the visitor center, they're not always dressed appropriately, and they're going to be going in and purchasing things like sweatshirts, for example. So definitely prepare for the elements when you come up here, and remember that it is totally different up here at the top of the mountain.
Yeah, it totally is. So what about precipitation? Why is there more in the mountain typically?
Yeah, absolutely. So of course, you have a lot of Atlantic moisture, for example. Let's talk about that. So one of the big things that always affects the mountains here, and sometimes many of our visitors might unfortunately encounter, a very fogged in park. So when you have moisture kind of trying to hit the mountains, well, the moisture is still going to exist, but it's going to be forced upwards. So when you have this moisture hitting the mountains, you're combining different areas of the air, so different layers of the air. And then you're forcing it upwards, which causes the air to cool and condense. And so this is a fun factoid right here. So when you are on top of something like Hawksbill, for example, you're going to be at the highest point in the park and one of the very wettest spots in Virginia. Up here at Big Meadows, we usually see about 55 to 60 inches of precipitation annually. On top of Hawksbill, maybe even a little bit more. But when you're on top of Hawksbill and you look down towards Luray or Harrisonburg, anywhere in the Shenandoah Valley, you're looking at one of the wettest places in Virginia. When you're at Hawksbill, you're looking down into the driest region of Virginia. So it's pretty cool to see the wettest and driest right there. And we just happen to have a record here at Shenandoah of about 103 inches of precipitation. That's a state record, by the way, 103 inches for 2018, where we had rain just about every day.
Oh, gosh. I think I remember that. So, what kind of climate drivers create those warmer than normal or colder than normal winters?
That's an excellent question. So, have you ever heard of El Nino?
Yes.
Have you ever heard of La Nina?
Yes.
All
In a
right.
minute, but yes.
Well, let's talk a little bit about some of these
Visual aids.
visual
Your
aids
big ol'
here.
nose.
So, of course, here we have El Nino. So El Nino is basically just going to be the warming of the equatorial Pacific waters off of South America. So the oceans are going to actually have about 10 times the amount of energy in them than the atmosphere does. So that means that when you warm a large area of the ocean, you're going to have a lot of climactic kind of effects. So in this case, a lot more moisture might be available for some of the storm systems that are kind of developing here in Eastern Virginia, or in the East, I should say, in general. I am from Yorktown originally, so I still say Eastern Virginia once in a while. But yes, so you have El Nino here that is definitely going to, usually skew us a little bit more towards a snowy winter. But, and this is a big but, this year we're going to be dealing with this. This is called La Nina. So La Nina is going to be the opposite of El Nino. This is going to be cooling of the Pacific waters off of South America. So in this case, you're going to have a lot more stable air. Now, that means that there's not going to be quite as much moisture available for some of these storm systems to get going. I think the chart wants me to talk about it. So let's take a look at the differences in snowfall here in Shenandoah National Park. So from 1934 to about 2000, a lot of records were kept up here for snowfall. And this is going to be utilizing some of those snowfall records. So this chart right here, all of these green bars, this is going to be some of those neutral year or non-El Nino, non-La Nina type of winters. Mm-hmm. Those tend to be pretty snowy. We have an average, we have unfortunately had to miss one or two measurements over the years because of severe conditions, but those are going to average out at about 47 inches annually, with about 81 inches in, about 1961. So yeah, that is going to be quite a bit of snow. But then you look at El Nino. El Nino is also going to be an average of about 47 inches. You see that there's a lot of high numbers here during El Nino. Not as many high numbers during neutral seasons, though. So you still see a lot of the effects of some of that extra moisture being injected into the atmosphere. And then you have this one right here, La Nina, the one that we are going to be in this year. Now, with the exception of one outlier that I know a lot of you probably remember very well, very fondly, or maybe not so fondly, is going to be 1995, 1996. This was the time that we saw a record in Shenandoah National Park of about 112 inches of snow.
Wow.
So, yeah, so these blue, if this is coming through all right, these blue bars right here are going to be La Nina years. The red bars are going to be El Nino years, and the green bars are going to be neutral years. So non-El Nino, non-La Nina. So that means that if you are a snow lover, typically you'd be hoping for a El Nino year. Of course, you see 5 red bars in that versus only 2 for La Nina. But El Nino and La Nina are not the only two drivers for a cold winter.
Plot twist.
Exactly. So this year we are actually going to be in a very unusual type of situation. This is our third straight La Nina. Now this has only happened a couple of other times on record. Plus we have maybe some effects of a major volcanic eruption called Hunga Tunga. So this was going to be a January 15th eruption out in the Pacific Ocean. So that injected a lot of water vapor into different areas of the atmosphere.
Okay.
It's probably going to be changing our setup a little bit this winter. So there's also going to be something called the North Atlantic Oscillation. There's also going to be the Arctic Oscillation, the Pacific North American Oscillation, and finally the Eastern Pacific Oscillation. And those are kind of going from east to west. Now the ones that affect us here in Shenandoah the most are going to be the North Atlantic Oscillation and the Arctic Oscillation. So those are pretty much kind of terms to kind of drive how the jet stream acts. And speaking of the jet stream, so the jet stream is kind of like let's say it's a river in the atmosphere. Now this jet stream is going to be kind of directing all the storm systems. So think of a feather being carried downstream by the stream.
Yeah.
And so this is basically going to be what you're talking about, except the feather is going to be storm systems. So Allie, if you take this side of this rope here, so this is going to be a pattern right here. If it was just straight this way to, let's say I'm west, Allie is east. Storm systems would just kind of get pulled along the jet stream and kind of make whatever weather happen in that area right along the jet stream. But if one of these oscillations, let's say, is in a position to cause effects to the jet stream, let's say it does this.
Wow.
So this would cause the storm systems to kind of go up and then down and then right up. In this case, let's say once again, I am going to be the west and Allie is going to be the east. This is what you want for a nor'easter, one of the largest storm systems that kind of develop on the face of the planet. So in this case, you would have a storm coming out of Canada in this case, like if my hand was Canada. So then it comes down, and let's say Virginia is right about here. And then you start to have this jet stream curving off to the north. When that occurs, you're getting the Atlantic moisture involved. You have a temperature gradient between the land and the ocean, and so you get these giant storms that explode. Now, when you have something called a negative North Atlantic Oscillation, this acts like let's say a linebacker, blocking any kind of football player from trying to get through. So when one of these linebackers is sitting up over Greenland, that is going to create a block in the atmosphere. And that is going to force this jet stream down the way that I showed you just a moment ago. And that is going to create a lot of availability of cold and potentially a lot of snow.
Yes. So let's get down to it. What are your thoughts for December?
All right, so December.
Everybody wants to know where the snow is.
All right, there's a reason that I've been picking on the North Atlantic Oscillation just a bit. So the North Atlantic Oscillation, as I mentioned, is going to be a pattern that does not allow storms to go straight across the country. They have to bend downward and then go up the coast. So what we are looking at is going to be what is potentially going to be a near record North Atlantic Oscillation in its negative phase. When this occurs, and by the way, only about 28 of the last 72 Decembers have actually been a negative North Atlantic Oscillation, and that's important.
Okay.
So that means that Decembers are not typically going to be one of our stormier months. However, this one might end up being a little bit different. So we're going to have this negative North Atlantic Oscillation, and it's going to be near record territory. Now, that's really important down the line through the entire winter. So once we get this North Atlantic Oscillation in place, it could be very hard for it to kind of change the pattern. So in about 10 of the 11 strongest North Atlantic Oscillation years, those years, that really good snowstorm pattern has existed in December, January, and February.
Wow. Wow.
So I think this is going to really start to affect a lot of the east, these northeastern snowstorms, nor'easters. I think that this is really going to start to take off somewhere around December 10th. We're going to start getting all of those pieces together for the pattern. It could be the 9th. And then, well, if you like a white Christmas, a white holiday, whatever you may celebrate, it's looking pretty good right now.
Awesome. That's what we needed to hear. Well, thank you so much. We can open the floor to some questions, which right now, the only one I'm seeing on Facebook is, when was the peak time for fall foliage this year? I know that we love fall in this park, and I love that we love that. So we'll answer that since it's the only question we have so far. If you guys have any more questions, please drop them in the comments. But peak fall foliage this year in the park, I want to say, was really mid-October to late October, depending on where you were in the park. So
We lost signal.
we did.
Mm-hmm.
Oh no. Let's see.
It just dropped.
That's interesting. Let me go here. I wonder why that was. Oh, you know what? I wonder if we got logged out. Why can't I click on this? Stream. Okay, there we are. Are we back? Did we lose anybody, or did you all lose us? Well, that is our only question at this time. So, just in case we were lost on anyone's stream, we can go ahead and say goodbye, I guess. We will be back in June to talk about what's happening in the park with the weather, because that's super interesting and it really makes sense of everything that happens up here. So it was excellent.
Yeah, absolutely. And if anybody is wondering kind of what that Big Meadows area looks like, or this Big Meadows area looks like, it definitely looks a lot different during the winter, I can tell you. And as I mentioned, in a couple of weeks, we might just see a blanket of white out here. There was a great ranger program by Ranger Carl that was done last year called the Winter Meadow Walk, I believe.
Yeah, it was.
That was a great way to see the meadow during the middle of winter. We're kind of like a frozen tundra up here.
It's so cool. Yeah, actually, you can check out the new webcam on top of the visitor center that looks over Big Meadows. That's new. It's great quality, and we are planning to watch the first snowfall from the webcam too. So thank you all for joining us today, and we will see you again early January. All right, so we kind of just have to hold it like this. He's gonna, I wonder